Thanks for joining us. Excited to be here with Dr. Richard Hammar, Chief Legal Counsel for the General Counsel of the Assemblies of God, graduate of Harvard Law School, and most importantly for what we're talking about right now, attorney and CPA, and someone who has a heart to help ministers and pastors. And that's why we're here talking today, talking about the 2014 tax guide. And when it comes to taxes, I know a lot of people find this area a little intimidating, trying to figure out exactly how to go about that process for the most benefit. And what's wonderful about Dr. Richard Hammar is that he has worked to make it easier for our ministers and pastors. So without further ado, Dr. Richard Hammar is here today to talk a bit about the tax guide. Thank you for joining us. Appreciate
Thanks,
that. Dr. Hammar, if you would, tell us a bit about what it takes to create this annual tax guide.
Well, let me just back up and say I do two tax guides. Sometimes there's some confusion on that. The main tax guide is
it's huge.
3 pounds. This is my annual church and clergy tax guide, 750 pages. You're not going to sit in the hammock drinking a lemonade poolside and read this. This is a reference book. You're not going to sit down with your tax return and try to fill it out using this book. I guess you could do that, but that's not the intention. This book is designed to provide a reference resource to church leaders on hundreds of tax issues that come up in your congregation. Anything from how do we know if somebody's an employee or self-employed, to 24 categories of taxable income, most of which most church leaders don't understand are taxable, to retirement plans for church staff, to all of the substantiation rules that apply to charitable contributions, to to tax exemptions for churches under state and federal law, on it goes. So this book has continuing relevance to churches throughout the year. But many years ago, it became obvious that there was a need for a second resource, one that could be used by ministers in completing their tax returns, and it was kind of a line-by-line, form-by-form booklet. So the Minister's Tax Guide, which I've been doing now for about over 20 years, that is designed to be used by ministers in completing their 1040 and all their associated tax returns. It also has an insert that it will assist the church in complying with the payroll tax reporting obligation. So I talk about all the tax returns that a church needs to fill out to comply with those payroll tax reporting rules. So all of those reporting issues are addressed in this shorter resource, 50 to 60 pages long. And so it's a limited resource. You're not going to look to that book as a reference book. It's not a reference book. And it basically, after April 15th, is not going to have much relevance. But I think you find that to be a very useful complement to the large tax guide. And I will say that over the years, there have been 8 or 9 major Protestant denominations that have used the shorter book as their denominational tax guide they provide to ministers. In most of those cases, it's through the pension board for that denomination. And I'm happy to say that in the assemblies, the Assemblies of God Financial Solutions has selected this resource and in the past made it available to you as a premium for submitting your ACMR return on time. But I think the last year or two, they have changed that policy. You might want to address that.
Sure. So the annual tax guide was a benefit, as you mentioned, for those Assemblies of God ministers who did fill out the ACMR research survey. What's great about it this year in working with the Assemblies of God headquarters is we have taken this resource and we've made it widely available to every AG minister and pastor out there. So what's great about this is towards the end of January, and of course through February, March, April, right up to tax day, our ministers will be able to download this resource. They'll be able to load it, print it if you will, look at the online PDF exclusively at agfinancial.org. And it's great because for the 30,000 plus ministers out there, everybody will have access to this resource. And you've written over, what, 100 books, I think, in regards to church law and tax. But this is an amazing resource that it's an honor to have Dr. Hammar prepare. We're honored to be able to provide it free of charge to all Assemblies of God ministers. you know, it's a large resource, even the smaller version, and as ministers are getting ready to prepare their taxes, are there any recommendations you might have on how they should tackle the information, how they should get into it, and the best way to use that resource?
Yes, the book was designed very carefully to facilitate the completion of tax returns. So it goes through all of the most common tax returns used by ministers, and that would be the 1040, Schedules A and C, the Form 2106, Schedule SE. Those are the main forms that most ministers file. And we go through line by line those forms. What do you put here? How do you compute this value? And so I think you'll find it a very useful resource in doing that. Let me emphasize that sometimes ministers want to shy away from trying to complete their own tax returns because of the complexity of the rules that apply to ministers. Let me say that there are unique rules in the tax code that apply to ministers, but those rules are not complex. Rather, they are unique. And there's a very important distinction. The fact that they're unique doesn't necessarily make them complex. In fact, they're not complex. They're just different. And with a resource like our Minister's Tax Guide, I think you're going to be able to navigate these issues and to be able to take a stab at completing your own tax return. I'm not opposed to finding your own tax preparer. I just think that most of you probably, with the assistance of this book, can do it yourself.
That's great. Well, we at AG Financial are excited to offer up this resource written by Dr. Richard Hammar. So thank you very much for doing that. I know many ministers rely on that every year. And we're happy to bring it to you exclusively at agfinancial.org. If you have any questions, feel free to email us at info@agfinancial.org. And we hope that you have a chance to explore the website, the many resources made available to you. And that's it. Until next year.